In the previous video, we had a general overview of the age of heroes in Greek mythology. As mentioned, the most famous hero of Greece is Hercules, and today we'll revisit stories about this hero. In earlier parts, we learned about Hercules' origins and his first great feats. Just to clarify, Hercules had to serve as a slave to King Eurystheus for 12 years due to committing the crime of murder. So in this video, I'll refer to them as labors, not victories. To recap, Hercules completed 6 glorious challenges, such as killing the lion, slaying the serpent, capturing the boar, catching the deer, shooting the birds, and cleaning up manure. It seemed like nothing could stop Hercules. Eurystheus had to come up with new, more difficult tasks, and with his outstanding creativity, he sent Hercules to capture animals. Again, this time he was tasked with going to the island of Crete to capture the bull of King Minos. This was the bull that Poseidon had given to Minos as a sign to make him king of Crete, on the condition that Minos would sacrifice it back to Poseidon. But Minos, fond of the beautiful bull, swapped it with another to offer for the sacrifice. Poseidon, angered, made the bull go mad, destroying crops, harassing people, and even mating with Minos' wife. But when a crazy bull meets a crazy person, it's no match. Hercules easily caught the bull barehanded and brought it back to Eurystheus for his next task. This time, Hercules was sent to Thrace to capture the herd of mares belonging to King Diomedes, son of the war god Ares. These were vicious horses raised on human flesh. If you were a tourist visiting Thrace, you'd probably be warmly welcomed by Diomedes, who might then offer you up as food for his horses. On the way to Thrace, Hercules passed through Thessaly and took the opportunity to visit his friend Admetus, the king of Pheræ. Apollo had once been exiled to tend cattle for Admetus, and during that time they became close friends. Admetus was also a well-known hero in Greece, married to Alcestis, the most beautiful daughter of King Peleus. On their wedding day, Admetus, distracted by the celebration, forgot to pay his taxes to the goddess Artemis and was cursed with a shortened lifespan. However, with Apollo's pleading, Artemis made a slight concession, allowing a family member to die in his place. That day eventually came. At first, Admetus planned to ask his parents to die for him, but fortunately Alcestis volunteered to take his place. She bathed and lay in her bed, waiting for death. During the morning, Hercules arrived and came up with an idea. He hid near Alcestis' bed, waiting for Thanatos, the god of death, to arrive. As soon as Thanatos appeared, Hercules leaped out, beating him mercilessly. Thanatos, usually used to bullying the dead, was caught off guard and ran away, nursing a bloody head. Thanks to this, Alcestis was saved, and Hercules continued on his journey. Arriving in Thrace, Hercules simply took the horses without asking permission from Diomedes. Just as he was about to board the ship, Diomedes arrived with his army, but Hercules quickly defeated him with a single blow. Some versions say that Hercules captured Diomedes and fed him to his own horses, who tore him apart. The blood of their master quenched the horses' thirst for blood, and Hercules easily brought them back to Eurystheus. Afterward, the horses were released into the wild, where they were promptly devoured by lions. Eurystheus was once again in a bind, struggling to come up with the next challenge for Hercules. Just when he was stuck, his daughter Admeta asked for a belt like the one worn by Queen Hippolyta of the Amazons. But this belt was a rare, one-of-a-kind item, so Eurystheus immediately tasked Hercules with stealing it. Hercules set off to the city of Themyscira, located at the foot of the mighty Caucasus Mountains. This mission seemed difficult, so Hercules gathered a team of allies, including the hero Theseus. The Amazons, who had heard much about Hercules, greeted him in style as he landed on the beach, muscular, tough-looking, and full of swagger. It was clear that Hercules, with his imposing presence, could make any Amazon fall at his feet. Hercules met Queen Hippolyta and explained his mission, and Hippolyta, being fond of Hercules, was willing to hand over the belt. However, Hera, seeing the situation as too easy, decided to intervene. She transformed herself into an Amazon warrior and spread rumors among the Amazon warriors that Hercules had come to kidnap their queen. Upon hearing this, the Amazon warriors attacked Hercules one after another. One by one, they charged at him, but each was knocked out by Hercules with a single blow. Realizing they were no match for him, the Amazons reluctantly handed over the belt. One of the Amazon generals, Antiope, was captured by Hercules and given to Theseus. Theseus had previously lost the beautiful Ariadne to the god of wine, Dionysus. Now that Theseus was of marrying age, he quickly made Antiope his wife. Sometime later, the Amazons launched an attack on Athens to rescue Antiope, believing she had been captured by Theseus. However, Antiope, now married, fought alongside Theseus in the battle. Sadly, she was struck by a stray arrow and died. In the end, the Amazons had killed the very person they came to save, and the battle came to a close. It's also worth mentioning the legend of the Amazon warrior women, which seems to reflect aspects of a matriarchal society. However, there is a dilemma regarding whether tribal warfare existed in such a matriarchy, and if so, how common it was for there to be tribes like the Amazons. It's likely that tribal warfare wasn't a widespread phenomenon in matriarchal societies, but rather a feature of patriarchal systems. Although the Amazon warriors are portrayed as noble and heroic, they consistently lose when fighting men, from Bellerophon to Hercules, Theseus, and even Achilles. The Amazon legend, then, seems to be a reflection of matriarchy, glorified to provide a backdrop for the heroic deeds of male warriors. Back to Hercules. On his way back to Greece, he passed by the city of Troy and saw a beautiful young woman chained to a rock near the sea. This was Princess Hesione of Troy, daughter of King Laomedon. Hercules approached and learned that when Laomedon first became king, Troy was not as grand as it is now. Only after Poseidon and Apollo were punished and sent to labor for him, did Laomedon convince them to build the city. In return, they agreed that all the livestock born that year would be given to them as payment. However, when the time came, Laomedon refused to pay, angering the gods. Once back on Mount Olympus, Apollo sent a plague to Troy, and Poseidon unleashed a sea monster to destroy the city. Laomedon went to the temple to ask the gods for help, and the prophecy said that only the sacrifice of Princess Hesione could appease Poseidon's wrath. Hercules then went to King Laomedon, offering to rid Troy of the sea monster, in exchange for the immortal horses of Troy, horses that originally belonged to Zeus, and had been given to Laomedon's grandfather, King Tros. After negotiating, Hercules set off to defeat the sea monster. Using his brute strength, he struck the creature repeatedly in the head until it died. Despite saving Hesione, Laomedon, true to form, once again refused to pay. Filled with anger, Hercules returned to Greece, ready to complete his task for Eurystheus and settle the score with Laomedon later. At this point, Eurystheus came up with a new task for Hercules: go capture some cows. But this time, it was more creative. Hercules was tasked with capturing the entire herd of cows belonging to the giant Geryon, not just one. Erythea, the land where Geryon lived, was located at the far western edge of the known world for the Greeks, what we now call Spain. Many had spoken of it, but few had actually made the journey to Erythea. Hercules traveled across the entire width of the Mediterranean, finally reaching the gateway to the vast ocean. But he found that the way was blocked by mountains, with no way forward. So Hercules simply chopped off the mountain peaks and pushed them apart, creating an opening between the seas. This is now known as the Strait of Gibraltar, linking the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. The two towering rock formations that stand there today are called the Pillars of Hercules, one located in Gibraltar, part of the United Kingdom, and the other in Ceuta, a Spanish city in Morocco. Now that the seas were connected, Hercules wasn't sure how to get to Erythea. He sat there, staring blankly at the sea from dawn until dusk, when suddenly the sun god Helios flew past in his chariot. Since Erythea was Helios' stop in the west before sailing east to begin the new day, Hercules took advantage of the opportunity and asked for a ride. When Hercules landed on Erythea, he immediately encountered the two-headed dog, Orthrus. Orthrus, a sibling of the multi-headed Hydra and the three-headed Cerberus, was tasked by the giant Geryon to guard the cattle. Sadly for the dog, it met Hercules, who swiftly defeated it with a single strike. When Geryon returned and found his dog dead, he became furious and chased after Hercules, who had already driven the herd to the beach. Well, to make a long story short, Geryon was no match for Hercules either and was quickly slain. It's hard to figure out what kind of hero Hercules is. He seems to spend his time killing people and animals, like some kind of vigilante from the Luang-Sun back, a reference to Chinese martial heroes. On his way back to Greece, Hera decided that Hercules hadn't yet faced enough trials. As Hercules arrived at the shores of Ionia, Hera cursed the herd of cattle to go mad, with each cow running off in a different direction. Hercules struggled greatly to round up the herd, but in the end, he only managed to capture half of them, losing the rest. Eurystheus, however, had no idea how many cows there were to begin with, so he counted the task as complete. It's true that Hercules hadn't faced enough trials, as Eurystheus originally only required 10 labors. The snake-slaying feat had been helped by Hercules' nephew, and the task of cleaning the stables had involved payment, so it didn't count. As a result, Hercules had to complete 2 more labors to make up for it. After sending Hercules on a journey to the west, Eurystheus now tasked him with another mission: go to the underworld and capture the dog. This task was beyond Hercules' usual capabilities, so he needed some divine help. Zeus sent Hermes to guide Hercules down to the underworld. When they reached the river Styx, they encountered Charon, the old ferryman, who demanded a toll. Hercules, not impressed, offered his fists as payment and was allowed to board the ferry. Once in the underworld, Hercules saw his old friends Theseus and Pirithous, who were punished and chained to a forgotten chair, living a vegetative life. They had foolishly descended into the underworld to attempt to kidnap Persephone, the wife of Hades. Hercules, upon hearing their story, chopped the chains and freed Theseus. But when he tried to free Pirithous, a great earthquake struck, a sign from the gods that they disapproved. Hercules, respecting the divine will, left Pirithous behind and continued deeper into the underworld. There he encountered the ghost of Meleager, another famous Greek hero. Meleager was the son of King Oeneus of Calydon. When King Oeneus failed to offer proper tribute to Artemis, the goddess sent a wild boar to ravage the land. The boar was fierce and difficult to deal with, so Meleager called upon other heroes to assist him in the hunt. Many of these heroes would later become part of the Argonauts, a group of legendary adventurers. Meleager himself was an Argonaut in some versions of the myth. Among those who came to hunt the boar was Atalanta, a rare female hero in Greek mythology. The hunt took place across a stretch of forest in Calydon. Thanks to her incredible speed, Atalanta chased down the wild boar and shot an arrow that injured it. This allowed Meleager to get close enough to spear the beast and finish it off. Only then did the other hunters rush in to claim the kill. Meleager believed that Atalanta deserved the honor of receiving the boar's head and pelt as a reward, but his uncles disagreed. Their reasoning was simple. They were sexist. Not only did they oppose awarding Atalanta, but they also insulted Meleager. A fight inevitably broke out, and Meleager ended up killing two of his uncles in the process. When Meleager's mother, Althea, heard the news that her brothers had been killed by her son, she was furious. In a fit of rage, she took a piece of firewood that had been carefully preserved and threw it into the fire. The backstory was that when Meleager was born, Althea had invited the Moirai, the goddesses of fate, to visit. One of them prophesied that Meleager's life would last as long as the piece of firewood that was burning in the hearth. Alarmed, Althea had extinguished the firewood and carefully stored it away. In her anger, she retrieved it from storage and threw it back into the fire, leading to Meleager's death in a battle with a neighboring city. Realizing her mistake, Althea was filled with regret and, overwhelmed by guilt, committed suicide shortly after. Some versions of the story also suggest that Althea prayed to the gods for justice, which led to her son's death. Meleager died with bitterness in his heart, leaving his sister Deianira all alone. When she met Hercules, she asked him to look after her sister and, more specifically, to marry her. Afterward, Hercules finally reached the palace of Hades. This part of the story was told in the video about Hades. Hercules boldly asked his uncle, Hades, to let him capture his dog. Hades agreed, telling Hercules that as long as he didn't turn Cerberus into 7 different dishes, he could take him. Hercules then set out to capture the 3-headed dog with his bare hands. When he brought Cerberus back to Eurystheus, the sight of the dog terrified him so much that he almost fainted. Eurystheus immediately ordered Hercules to return Cerberus to Hades, so once again, Hercules had to journey to the underworld to return the dog. Realizing that this was enough killing for one hero, Eurystheus assigned Hercules his final task: to pick the golden apples of Hera. These apples were originally a gift from Mother Earth, Gaia, to Hera as a wedding present. Hera had kept them in her garden, located near where Atlas held up the sky. To guard the apples, Hera had a dragon named Ladon and 3 nymphs called the Hesperides watching over them. On his way to the garden, Hercules passed through the Caucasus Mountains and encountered Prometheus, who was chained to a rock. Seeing the benefactor of mankind being tortured, Hercules climbed the mountain just in time to see Zeus's eagle flying to eat Prometheus's liver, as it did every day. Without hesitation, Hercules shot the eagle down and broke the chains, freeing Prometheus. In gratitude, Prometheus told Hercules that he could not pick the apples himself. He would need the help of Atlas. Hercules then traveled to Hera's garden and stopped by Atlas's place to ask for assistance. Atlas agreed but said that Hercules would have to hold up the sky while Atlas went to pick the apples himself. It was heavy, as you can imagine, the sky after all. Without Athena's help to share the burden, Hercules would have likely snapped his back. When Atlas returned, he suggested that it would be too far for him to go back and forth, so he offered to deliver the apples to Eurystheus himself. But Hercules, being clever, realized that Atlas was trying to pass the burden back onto him. He asked Atlas to hold up the sky for just a moment, while Hercules adjusted his cloak to make it more comfortable. Thinking Atlas was too old and tired to realize, he agreed and took the weight again, leaving Hercules free to grab the apples and return. With the 3 golden apples in hand, Hercules left Atlas holding the sky and returned to Eurystheus. And just like that, after 12 long years, Hercules completed his tasks as Eurystheus' servant. During these 12 years, Hercules accomplished extraordinary feats. He rerouted the Alpheus and Peneus rivers to clean the stables of Augea. Hercules moved mountains to create the Strait of Gibraltar. connecting the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean, symbolizing humanity's triumph in conquering and shaping nature for its own purposes. He briefly bore the weight of the sky for Atlas, reflecting humanity's willingness to confront the challenges posed by nature and the cosmos. Hercules ventured to the farthest west, a place no one had ever reached before, and descended into the underworld to capture the three-headed dog, symbolizing humanity's insatiable desire to explore and conquer the unknown. By freeing Prometheus, Hercules liberated not just a god, but humanity's future. Prometheus had been chained for bringing fire to mankind, so freeing him symbolized humanity's role in liberating itself from suffering. Though somewhat rough around the edges, Hercules represents the immense aspirations of humanity, at least in the context of ancient Greece. However, his story does not end here because Hera continued to torment the illegitimate child of her husband like an unrelenting spirit. Remembering his promise to the spirit of Meleager from his journey to the underworld, Hercules first traveled to the kingdom of Calydon in Iliia to find Deianira. At that time, many suitors, including the river god Alchelus, were vying for her hand. Despite Deianira rejecting all of them, Alchelus was persistent. He shapeshifted into a serpent, a dragon, a bull, and even a horse to woo her. When Hercules arrived, both Deianira and her father were very pleased, but Alchelus, still determined, wouldn't give up, and a battle over the woman began. Initially, they wrestled, with Hercules continuously throwing Alchelus to the ground. Alchelus then transformed into various animals, trying to gain an advantage, but Hercules had plenty of experience in dealing with animals, and he soon defeated Alchelus. Deianira became Hercules' wife. The couple lived together in her father's palace, seemingly leading a peaceful life. However, during a party, a young relative of Deianira accidentally splashed hot water on Hercules while cleaning his feet. Enraged, Hercules slapped the boy, killing him instantly. Hercules had committed murder again and was forced to exile himself from Calydon. The couple moved to Tiryns, but on the way they had to cross a swift river called Evenos. There, a centaur named Nessos made a living by ferrying passengers across the river. Nessos didn't have a boat, but instead carried passengers on his back while swimming across. Hercules threw their belongings across the river and swam ahead, while Deianira asked Nessos to carry her. But when Hercules reached the opposite shore, he heard Deianira's cries. It turned out that Nessos, enchanted by her beauty, had planned to abduct her and was not taking her across the river. Without hesitation, Hercules fired an arrow, dipped in the blood of the Hydra, striking Nessos and sending him into a deathly stupor. Despite his impending death, Nessos managed to tell Deianira that Hercules would eventually be unfaithful, advising her to keep some of his blood as a remedy. If Hercules ever strayed, she could use it on his shirt to make him return to her. After speaking, Nessos died, and Deianira followed his instructions. But Nessos wasn't entirely wrong. Not long after Hercules arrived in Oechalia, where King Eurytos, famous for his exceptional archery skills, resided. Eurytos was also the one who had taught Hercules archery. King Eurytos had many children, but he favored his son, Iphitos, for his honesty and upright character, as well as his daughter, Iole, who was renowned for her beauty and grace. Many suitors came from all over to ask for her hand in marriage, so Eurytos decided to hold a bow and arrow contest to choose the suitor. Many heroic men participated, but none succeeded. Hercules, eager to join in the fun, entered the contest and defeated his former teacher. However, despite this victory, Eurytos refused to give Iole to Hercules, saying that after serving as a slave for 12 years, he wasn't worthy to marry his daughter. At a subsequent banquet, Eurytos further insulted Hercules and had him expelled from Oechalia. Hercules returned to Tiryns, but he had already fallen in love with the beautiful Iole. Sometime later, Iphitos came to Tiryns to meet Hercules. It turns out that King Eurytos had lost his entire herd of cattle and suspected Hercules of taking them in revenge for not being allowed to marry Iole. However, Iphitos, believing that someone as rough as Hercules wouldn't take revenge in that way, decided to search for the cattle to clear Hercules' name. The real thief was Autolycos, the son of Hermes, who inherited his father's skill for theft. Hercules, impressed by Iphitos' loyalty and determination, grew fond of him, and the two became close friends. One day, Hercules took Iphitos to the top of the city wall to show him the view, and in a sudden fit of madness, he threw Iphitos off, causing him to fall to his death. This wasn't truly Hercules' fault, as Hera's relentless influence had driven him into a temporary insanity, but no one knew this, and Hercules was once again branded as a murderer. This time, of a guest who had come to clear his name. Zeus, unable to tolerate his son's actions any longer, sent a horrible disease to afflict Hercules. He became weak and sickly, unable to heal despite all attempts. In his suffering, Hercules went to the temple of Delphi to seek guidance from the god Apollo. However, the priestess Pythia refused to let someone like Hercules, a murderer, enter the temple. Angered by her attitude, Hercules stole her three-legged stool. Apollo appeared, demanding that Hercules return it, but Hercules refused and the two of them began to fight. Hercules, already weakened by illness, struggled to fight against Apollo, and seeing his son in danger, Zeus intervened. He struck the ground between them with a thunderbolt, stopping the fight. Finally, Apollo decided that Hercules had to sell himself into slavery for 3 years to Queen Omphale. The proceeds from his sale were to be given to King Eurytos as compensation for the death of Aphetos. However, Eurytos refused to accept the payment and chose instead to keep the grudge against Hercules. So, after already serving 12 years as a slave to Eurystheus, Hercules found himself forced into another 3 years of servitude. Omphale was a widowed queen in Lydia, living in solitude. While loneliness was difficult to bear, what was even worse was the lack of money and the inability to earn any. Lydia was constantly plagued by bandits, causing disruption and economic stagnation. Omphale longed for someone who could help, and when she acquired Hercules, it felt like striking gold. Anyone who dared to cause trouble would be crushed by Hercules' might. However, aside from dealing with the bandits, Hercules also had to perform other tasks, such as dressing up as a servant girl, sitting daily to spin wool, checking the fibers, and tending to the spinning wheel. Or at times he would carry water, do laundry, and cook. Meanwhile, Omphale wore Hercules' clothes, draped herself in the lion's skin, replaced her crown with a lion's head, carried a bow, and hung a sword by her side. She even tried lifting a large wooden club to complete the ensemble, but it was too heavy, so she abandoned the idea. After his time as Omphale's slave ended, Hercules returned home. But first, he had to take revenge on King Laomedon of Troy for refusing to pay him after he had slain the sea monster, which he almost forgot about. Hercules gathered heroes from all over Greece to form a large army and march on Troy. The battle didn't last long. The Greek heroes climbed the walls, opened the city gates, and the army flooded into Troy, causing the city to fall. Laomedon was killed by Hercules' arrow, and the beautiful princess Hesione was captured. As a reward to the heroic Telamon, who had led the charge in battle, Hercules gave him Hesione as his wife. Hercules also allowed Hesione to ransom a prisoner as a wedding gift, and she chose her youngest brother. From that day on, her brother took the name Priam, which in Greek meant to redeem. Hercules handed over the city of Troy to Priam, who would go on to become the father of Hector and Paris, the last king of Troy before it was destroyed. After avenging Laomedon, Hercules turned his attention to Oechalia to take revenge on Eurytos. Killing his son wasn't enough. He had to kill the father and take his daughter as well. This task proved easy. After defeating Eurytos, Hercules made his way to the city of Trachis to reunite with his wife and children. The reason Trachis was significant was that when Hercules had been sold into slavery to Queen Omphale, his wife Deianira and their children had to flee Tiryns and find refuge elsewhere. They had taken shelter in Trachis, a city in Thessaly, under the rule of King Ceyx. By bloodline, Ceyx was Hercules' uncle, a sympathetic relative who allowed Deianira and her children to stay in his city. When Hercules returned, Deianira noticed a young woman among the prisoners, crying and looking distressed. She inquired about the woman's identity, as any wife would, and soon discovered that the girl was none other than Princess Iole, daughter of King Eurytos. Deianira learned all about Hercules' visit to Oechalia, the archery contest, and his rejection by Eurytos, and understood that for 3 full years Hercules had been seeking a new wife. As she thought about it, Deianira grew increasingly saddened. She remembered the words of the centaur Nessos and retrieved the vial of his blood. She applied it to a garment and sent it to Hercules, hoping that he would wear it during a ritual to honor Zeus. Deianira, believing that the cloak would restore Hercules' devotion to her, was horrified when the garment caused him unbearable pain. The blood of Nessos had been poisoned by the Hydra's venom, and Hercules was racked with agonizing torment. The cloak clung to his skin, and when he tried to tear it off, it ripped away pieces of his flesh. Despite his struggles, Hercules' strength couldn't save him. As he writhed in agony, he called for his son, Hylos, asking him to take him to a remote mountain where no mortal eyes could witness his death. He also entrusted Iole to Hylos, telling him that if he couldn't marry her, then his son must. Meanwhile, Deianira, upon realizing the mistake she had made by trusting the centaur Nessos' blood, was struck speechless with grief. Her face drained of color, and silently, without a word, she retreated to her room, where she took her own life. Though Hercules was on the verge of death, he still did not pass. He commanded his son and his loyal disciple Philocrates to build a funeral pyre atop Mount Ota. They carried Hercules to the pyre and he asked for a quick death in the flames. hoping the fire would end his pain rather than allowing it to continue. Hylos, unable to bring himself to light the fire, stood hesitantly. It was Philocrates, following his master's wishes, who finally lit the pyre, bowing his head in reverence to the hero whose labors had changed the very fabric of the world. As the fire consumed Hercules, a storm darkened the sky, and a thunderclap shook the earth. A brilliant flash of light split the heavens. Zeus signaled to the gods of Olympus to welcome his son. The goddess Nike, at Zeus's command, descended in a golden chariot to retrieve Hercules. In some versions of the story, the gods Athena and Hermes also played their parts. Hercules was granted immortality and joined the gods in Olympus. From that day forward, Hera no longer held a grudge against the hero, her husband's illegitimate son. She had tormented him throughout his life, but she let go of her vengeance now that he had ascended to divinity. And so, the story of Hercules came to an end. In the next video, we will discuss the final 2 generations of the heroic age, including the Trojan War and the events that followed.